people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. A recent post from unbeaten up-and-comer from out of Canada, Howling, who said, "It's been frustrating this year not being able to do what I love. I fought back in March and won via TKO, and since then, I've been ready to go, but due to matters that are no fault of mine, I wasn't given an opportunity. I have a couple of offers on the table, and I'm going to take this week to sit down with my team and figure out what is the best next step in my career. I appreciate all of you guys' continued support. I will update you all shortly as soon as I've made a decision, and I'm hoping to be able to deliver some fight news with that." It's strange that Howling isn't with a major promotional outfit, because upon looking at her, you can see she's got the ability, you can see she's got the ceiling, the look, and the youth. This is a young fighter that has many good years ahead of her, and yet she's not with a major outfit, not even a local one, not even a Lee Baxter in Canada, or in Eye of the Tiger Management, a group Yvonne Michelle.
And it's not like those local promotional outfits don't sign female fighters. They sign female fighters. Group Yvonne Michelle has several female fighters.
Lee Baxter went as far as signing Taylor Robertson. She's from Australia. I mean, for signing an Australian fighter, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that, why wouldn't you pick up a local one? A local fighter that could develop a local following, like Howling, Eye of the Tiger Management, who were very much invested in the career of Mary Spencer. Mary, who just lost for the second time to Femke Hermans. I happen to think that Howling is more adequately suited for the pros than Mary Spencer. I mean, Mary is getting up there in age. She's pushing 40. She spent a lot of time in the amateurs. That's why. Whereas Bree's in her early 20s.
Mid-20s. 25 years old, sporting a professional record of 5 wins with no losses, no draws, 1 knockout, 1 recorded knockout. And I've seen her in action. I've seen several of her fights. She's good.
Very good. And I find it strange that a major promotional outfit, hell, not even a local one, has picked her up yet. The silver lining is she's saying she'll have 1 more fight before the end of the year, that she does have some offers on the table, and she's going to be mulling them over and making a decision, campaigning anywhere in between 118 and 122 pounds. These are very deep divisions, deep weight classes with a lot of fighters and a lot of champions.
And a lot of opportunity.
You see major promotional outfits go out of their way to sign these blue chip amateurs, like Eye of the Tiger Management did with Mary Spencer, like Boxer did with Lauren Price, and Matchroom did with Sky Nicholson. And it sometimes takes these fighters a while to transition from an amateur style to a pro style.
With Howling, you don't have that problem.
No, granted that, no, she's not an Olympian, she's not an amateur standout, but she perhaps doesn't need to be. You know, not every great pro boxer was a standout amateur, and not every standout amateur made a great pro boxer. You could do a lot worse than sign Howling, I'll tell you that. She's got that X factor. I see the fighters that Yvonne Michelle has picked up, you know, Kim Clavel and Marie-Eve Dicaire, several others. I see some of those fighters over there on Eye of the Tiger Management, and these are good fighters. They're all good fighters, but they don't have that X factor that Howling has. This is a hungry young fighter with many good years to give to the sport, and with a major promotional outfit behind her to help her develop and mold her into a champion. Well, you might not just have a champion, you might have a genuinely marketable fighter, and those two things shouldn't be confused.
They shouldn't.
Oftentimes in the sport, they're mutually exclusive.
No, not every good fighter is a marketable fighter. Not every capable boxer is a marketable boxer, but Howling, she's got something.
I mean, she's good enough that she's been Alicia Baumgartner's sparring partner more than once. If you doubt what she can do, I hope the news is encouraging when it comes to Howling. I hope she does get in another fight in before this year is out.
We'll see what happens.
In men's light heavyweight news, veteran promoter Bob Arum is open to the scenario of Beterbiev returning to the UK for the winner of Buatsi versus Azeez. which is set to go down this weekend, a Boxer show by way of Sky Sports being Top Rank's UK broadcast partner, Top Rank CEO Bob Arum, who promotes WBO, IBF, WBC light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev, is open to the possibility of bringing his boxer back to the UK to fight the winner of Saturday's clash between unbeaten contenders Joshua Buatsi and Dan Azeez. Back in January, Beterbiev traveled to the UK and stopped mandatory challenger Anthony Yarde at Wembley in London. He's back in the ring January of next year in his home country of Canada, adopted home, when he defends his belts against another British mandatory in Callum Smith. Since Artur made such a big splash in the UK against Yarde, we would not be opposed to him returning one day in the future.
What you're really saying is that you don't know what to do with this guy and you're going to outsource him again, just like you did before.
Even more interesting is that this weekend's fight between Joshua Buatsi and Dan Azeez is a step in the direction of Dmitry Bivol, the only other champion at this weight. It's a step in his direction, not Artur's, because this fight is a WBA eliminator. The bout between Buatsi and Azeez has been sanctioned as a WBA final eliminator. The WBA's light heavyweight title is held by Dmitry. Azeez is very familiar with Beterbiev after having been used as a sparring partner in the past. Those overhands and the body work, those little things. There are small little things that Beterbiev does. I don't think a lot of people give him credit for his actual boxing IQ because obviously he's knocked out everyone. Azeez told Sky Sports earlier this year, in sparring as well, you'd throw a shot at him and you'd miss by an inch. He's got very good footwork. He might come across like he's flat-footed, but he's actually got good footwork.
What Adam is talking about is Artur's ability to judge the distance.
And move in kind. When you rack up 100% knockout percentage, when you literally knock out everybody they put in the ring with you, a lot of what you do is lost, and all people remember are the knockouts and not what led up to them. Adam stated, he might come across like he's flat-footed, but he's actually got good footwork, and he knows how to move around the ring. It's that punching power. It keeps you jittery and makes you expend more energy than you want to because you know, if I'm too close, I could get tagged. If I make a mistake, I could get tagged. So you're thinking a lot more than you want to, and it's hard. As you see when you watch him, when he throws his shots, it doesn't look like he puts too much into it. It's deceiving, but there's power behind it.
Artur was a standout amateur when he was an amateur. Fought some familiar faces in the amateurs. Sergey Kovalev, Alexander Vozdik, Dmitry Bivol. They all bumped heads in the amateurs.
He even fought Alexander Usyk. If you watch Artur Beterbiev in action, you would be right to assume that he's a pressure fighter, but he's no mere pressure fighter. You're not talking about a C-class or a B-class pressure fighter. This guy's maybe an A-.
He's up there.
A naturally heavy-handed fighter who can box. A naturally heavy-handed fighter who doesn't have to waste a half a second or a millisecond loading up his punches because he's naturally heavy-handed. So the punch finds the target with relative ease. Artur Beterbiev and how he throws his shots, he shoots from the hip. That's the best way to describe it. And the punch doesn't even have to travel very far for there to be a lot on it. He throws devastating punches within close quarters because he's naturally heavy-handed, though his shot selection is also worth considering. He knows what to throw and when to throw it, whether it's an uppercut up the middle
or a hook around the guard, a shot just under the elbow or around it. This guy's gonna get to you. He's an educated pressure fighter.
I don't want to see him face the winner of Azeez versus Buatsi. I want to see him against Dmitry Bivol. That's who I want to see him fight. And if he is successful early next year against Callum Smith, given his age, that he already has 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight, and there's only 1 missing, I don't understand why Bob isn't talking about that. Why are you talking about outsourcing him to the UK again for the winner of this fight? The winner of this fight ain't his mandatory.
They're Dimitri's.
I don't want to see him take care of Dmitry Bivol's mandatories. I want to see him fight Dmitry Bivol. Bob has been finding different ways to pour cold water on this fight for at least 2, maybe 3 years now. Before Dmitry beat Canelo Alvarez, Bob Arum was quoted as saying that Bivol is a boring fighter that has no pizzazz. Afterwards, after he beat Canelo, very briefly, Bob was entertaining the idea of that fight, but I feel like he's since gone cold again because he's not talking about Beterbiev versus Bivol. He's talking about Artur fighting the winner of this weekend's fight.
What's going on with your connections in Saudi Arabia, Turkey al-Sheikh, and all those good people over there? Can't they bankroll this thing? That if you don't have faith in it commercially, here stateside or somewhere else, can't the Saudis pay for it?
I don't know. From the very beginning, I've always favored Dmitry Bivol to potentially win this fight because of how long it would take to make it, the time it would take, and how time isn't on Artur's side. Artur is several years older than Dmitry Bivol. I favored Dmitry to win this thing for two reasons primarily. Dmitry's base style, his balanced approach, and Artur's age, that even though Artur has the kind of stopping power that could turn around a fight with a single punch, at the end of the day, your power is only as devastating as your ability to land it. And if anybody has the ability to work around Artur's power, it's Dmitry more than anybody else. It's Dmitry more than Dan Azeez or Joshua Buatsi, but that's not what Bob is talking about. I mean, if your connection's in Saudi Arabia, if you now have access to that treasure chest, then why aren't you doing more to make this fight? I'm sure that Eddie would be happy to send Dmitry over because he doesn't have him doing much of anything anyway.
Do you remember what Bob said when somebody asked him if he'd be willing to send Shakur over to Showtime? He says they don't have to because he says they control a lot of the money now.
So use some of that money to make this fight. What's the problem?
This is the fight to make. These are the last two men standing, the last two champions, and your guy isn't getting any younger.
Dmitry Bivol's base style, that's not going to get easier to deal with as time progresses. You don't want to wait too late to make it. I mean, Dmitry, you see what he did to Zurdo Ramirez? This is a balanced guy who knows how to turn it up and turn it down, knows exactly when to do it. You know, he's often characterized as a defensive wizard, a defensively minded fighter, economic, but with Zurdo, he actually broke character. He initiated a lot of those exchanges, stepping into his jab and bringing punches over to force Zurdo onto his back foot, where he's not as effective.
Then bouncing out of range to stay out of harm's way, stay out of the way of Zurdo's counter.
In and out, back and forth, initiating the exchanges to make Zurdo uncomfortable, to beat him to the punch, and then getting out of the way of the shots. He's balanced like that. He's fleet of foot, and that's not going to get easier for Artur to deal with over time. What do you want to do? You want to wait till he's 40 till you do this thing?
Or is it that you don't plan on doing it at all? You don't want to do it?
It's just how boxing is sometimes. The fights that make the most sense to make is sometimes the fights that don't get made, never get made.
And it's unfortunate.
In men's welterweight news, Terrence Crawford's longtime trainer, Bomac McIntyre, on a Spence rematch said, if it happens at 160, 147, 122, it's still gonna be the same damn thing.
People are just being stubborn. Spence is being stubborn pursuing this rematch.
It's that or he's cashing out. Bomac isn't sweating the possibility of his man facing Spence again. Although there isn't an official date in place just yet, whenever the minutia of their deal is hammered out, Bomac will make sure that the pound-for-pound star is ready to rock and roll. When the rematch happens, mark my words, the same thing is going to happen, Bomac told Fight Hub TV. While it appears likely to happen, there is one small issue that both sides need to address. Spence is a big man. There's a reason why he calls himself the Big Fish. It isn't just because he considers himself the best fighter at 147, but also because he is the biggest welterweight.
Spence is not a consummate professional. What he does in between fights is the main indicator.
They say that he's a big welterweight, that he's big for the weight. That's based on what he balloons to in between fights, but he balloons to those weights because he doesn't take care of himself, because he's not a consummate professional. He doesn't live in the gym. Spence has always struggled with making the welterweight limit, but after what occurred on July 29th, the 33-year-old is hopeful that Crawford is, at least to a certain extent, merciful. According to their contractual agreement, Crawford has the option to choose the weight of their impending rematch since he was the winner the first time around. Spence wants their sequel to take place at 154. So far, Crawford hasn't said much in terms of whether or not he'd be willing to acquiesce to his request. I think that Crawford harbors a lot of hard feelings based on he was treated in the last 5 years leading up to that Spence fight, only for the people that criticized him and the fighter himself.
You're expecting me to do you favors?
There was an interview with Leonard Ellaby a few weeks ago where Leonard characterized it as Spence giving Crawford an opportunity. It was in reference to this same subject, the contracted wait for a second fight, and how Leonard chose to phrase it. He phrased it as if Errol was doing Crawford a favor by fighting him, a favor, as opposed to a duty. What a fighter, what a champion, a unified champion is expected to do. I mean, that's the frame of mind that these people operate.
Leonard characterized it as Errol giving Terrence an opportunity, as opposed to two unbeaten champions doing what they are expected to do, what the paying public pays them to do, pays to see.
From Bomac's point of view, the weight doesn't quite matter anyway. Whether it's 154 or an absurd number, there won't be much of a difference if it happens at 160, if it happens at 147, if it happens at 122. It's still gonna be the same damn thing. And I actually agree, that whether you do it at 147, 154, or 160, the outcome is going to be the same because you guys are overemphasizing the role of the weight. Errol Spence Jr. was doing just fine up until he fought Terrence Crawford, and that's because nobody that he fought was Terrence Crawford.
You just want to make it out like he was all of a sudden emaciated, when in reality, it's because he was fighting a better fighter than any fighter he had fought so far. He was good enough to beat the Danny Garcias, the Yordenis Ugases of the world. But when he ran into Terrence, that's when reality struck.
She's not saying that weight and what you do in between fights had nothing to do with it. Oh, it definitely had something to do with it, but it's also the tactical and technical deficiencies of Errol Spence Jr. that he approaches every single fight with every single fighter the same way. He's not as nuanced and streamlined as Terrence, and at 154 or 160, he's gonna be open for the exact same punches he was open for at 147. That's why the outcome is gonna be the same, because you're not all of a sudden gonna change. You're not all of a sudden gonna get used to fighting southpaws. You're not used to fighting southpaws.
You just got your ass kicked by one, so all of a sudden you're used to it, and guess what? If you are used to it, he's a switch hitter. He can switch over to orthodox.
Errol Spence Jr. at his very best is a textbook boxer puncher with a penchant for volume. He likes to throw punches in bunches, and up until now, that's worked for him. But when you open up that much on a guy like Terrence, when you open up that much on a counterpuncher who's fleet of foot, he ain't gotta do too much. He's gonna walk you into punches. You're gonna give him all the openings he needs.
You're gonna do half the work for him. Stylistically, this fight has never favored Errol Spence Jr. It doesn't now at 147 or 154.
The shock and awe from Errol Spence Jr.'s core supporters who couldn't believe their eyes that everything I've been telling you for the last 5 years, you saw it. It happened. And it will happen again, whether the rematch is at 147 or 154, because the weight ain't gonna change who you are. Your temperament as a fighter, your habits, your defensive deficiencies, that doesn't change based on the rematch happening at junior middle.
Oh, so you think that you'll be a little bit more strong, a little bit more durable at 154? Well, so will he. It's not like you're walking in at 154 and he's walking in at 147.
It's gonna be the same thing. I don't imagine this is a rematch that Showtime is too crazy about putting on, because it's not gonna sell more at the box office than the first one did. The mystique is gone.
But Spence wants to do it.
So give him what he wants and put him out of his misery.